Good evening, everybody. I am your host for this evening's Conversation Starters by the Black Doctoral Network. This is our weekly web series where we discuss a variety of topics within a plethora of research areas that are relevant to our community. And I'm really excited this evening to bring to you all our topic entitled Trauma, Healing, and Resilience. This is a very profound topic, and I'm excited to have some expert panelists here with us this evening to explore this topic further and help us conceptualize exactly what the relationship between all of these factors are. Our first panelist up that we have is Dr. Sandra Gaines. She received her doctorate in education. She currently is a senior research associate at a research consulting firm in Washington, D.C., and her research interests include looking at women who have experienced trauma. I welcome you this evening, Dr. Gaines.
Thank you very much. It's nice to be here.
Okay, thank you. Our second panelist that we have joining us this evening is Dr. Vanessa Barnes Bay. She received her doctorate in human services and a specialization in clinical social work. She is also the executive director of a nonprofit organization entitled UMI Research Coalition, which focuses on providing services for disadvantaged men and women, specifically that have experienced intimate partner violence, as well as the homeless population. And I'm just excited to have you here with her research interest in spirituality, coping strategies, resilience, women, and mindfulness. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Our third panelist that we have joining us is Dr. Nicole Jackson, who received her PhD in forensic psychology. She also is a trauma, healing, and resilience consultant and coach to women, men, and professionals. Her research interests entail looking at the resilience of women's ability to sustain healthy relationships. I welcome you, Dr. Jackson.
Hi, thank you. I'm glad to be here.
All right. Well, I just want to go ahead and jump right into this topic because it's so profound. It's a topic I would say that we often shy away from within our community. And I want to go ahead and get started with the first question. How would you all describe the relationship between trauma, healing, and resilience? I can go ahead and start with Dr. Jackson.
Hi. So, how I would describe the relationship between it's like a cycle, right? It is trauma, then the start your journey towards resilience, which then encompasses healing, right? So, a lot of times people will say, "Oh, you had trauma, you're resilient, heal," right? And that's not how it works. It doesn't work like that. We are innate to be survivors. We're not innate to be resilience. Resilience is fostered and developed, right? And so that's the relationship between it. You can't skip the let's start healing within ourselves so that we can get on our journey to resilience and then just skip from trauma to resilience. We're causing more damage to our people doing that and looking at it that way.
Okay, thank you for that response. Dr. Gaines, what are your thoughts?
Well, I think from my experience, I just think it's an interrelated phenomenon that takes place. I think that it overlaps at times. There's a trauma situation, and healing and resilience may not come until sometime later. And through that, you are surviving. Through that, you are dealing and coping. And I'm just interested in how that tension exists, and that's what I like to explore. More that tension, and I'm more interested in faith and therapeutic recovery. So I'm interested in how that, is the resiliency captured in the faith belief or in the therapeutic recovery that you have.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Barnes Bay.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the topic. When it comes to trauma, from what I know it to be, is a deep wound or a very
Mhm.
traumatic experience that leaves you in a lot of pain and a lot of uncertainty about who you think you are or know you are. For trauma could be very different for each and every one of us. So it is an experience, it's something that you go through. And for that, it could be various definitions. When it comes to healing, healing is a process. Healing could be six
Mm.
months, 9 months, a year, or lifelong for many of those who experience that trauma. There's no limit or boundary as to how you heal or what that healing looks like. When it
Correct.
comes to resilience, resilience is the strategy, the coping mechanisms. It's what you do. It's those little steps that you take to overcome or to cope or to deal with that particular traumatic event. And so what I like to look at as resilience is all of us are resilient in some way. Each and every day we get up and we deal with life, we are being resilient by being able to get out of bed, go to work, deal with our day-to-day activities. And so it is really just a matter of to heal through that particular trauma.
Okay, thank you. I do enjoy hearing everyone's response to that because as we can see from that the responses is it's looked at differently. It's so many
Mhm.
components that actually make it up. So that's really important to really understand when we're looking at trauma, healing, and resilience. The next question that I have is what would you all say are cultural factors that influence an individual's ability to heal from trauma and become resilient? Dr. Gaines.
Well, I think probably in the African American community, we look more to our faith. And in my case, I'm talking about the Christian faith. I know there are other faith expressions, and I would imagine that they have a similar support too. Though I'm just, my experience is a Christian faith, but I think that we don't always apply it in a cultural sense. I think sometimes we look more at an emotional experience as opposed to a healing experience. And I just think of, like in scripture, the Bible is full of people who have suffered trauma.
Hmm.
And it's a book full of traumatic experiences from Adam and Eve to to Christ. And the scripture tells us be anxious for nothing.
Hmm.
But I don't think we look at it in that way. We don't really apply it in that way. And I think from a cultural experience, we don't look at uh, therapy. I think that's changing. I think we are beginning to realize that you can have an emotional wound and you can still have your faith and you can seek a therapist or a counselor or something like that. It's no different than any other seeking another professional like a lawyer or a plumber or something like that. So I think that it's changing. I think we're becoming more aware of the benefits, and I think there is a place to combine a faith belief as well as therapeutic practice and recovery.
Okay. Thank you for highlighting it, those factors. It's really important.
Mhm.
Dr. Jackson, what are your thoughts?
Culturally speaking, I believe what is influenced on one's ability to heal from their trauma is that the support systems are not always present. And in order
Mhm.
to get there, you have to have support.
Hmm.
And intention is absent a lot of the time as well, because healing is an intentional act. And if you look at the two things that I just said, you're intentionally going to seek out a support system that is going to help you begin your journey towards healing. Um, I do agree that spirituality, and is what I found a lot in my study as well, plays a role in part of that
Mhm.
setting up of support systems.
Mhm.
And a lot of times in our, like I said, a lot of times in our culture, it's missing. A lot of times in culture will say, if this happened to me, I'm not, forget spirituality, I'm not looking at that. And then also, just to echo, therapeutic services sometimes in some cultures is looked at like, how can they help me when it's my situation? So being able to change those outlooks in those kinds of situations would influence better towards the healing.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Dr. Barnes Bay, what are your thoughts? I think we have I think you're muted. No.
No.
Okay, now I'm unmuted.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So I wanted to say I do agree with both of my panelists in terms of describing those cultural factors that influence one's ability to heal. When it comes to the people of African descent, spirituality is one of those topics that is not widely discussed in the way of how one perceives their culture to be. It is not
Yeah.
necessarily defined by their race or just purely their faith or their religion. It's how they see it. So I think in today's time, we need to revisit how we define what those cultural factors are to the people that we serve, because we can have our historical definitions that may have applied at that time, but we are
Mm,
in a very diverse state nowadays that individuals are redefining what cultural factors mean to them. So, such as religion, when you talk about religion and its influence to help one heal, well, for a period of time in history, we thought that was the solution. We would go to our religion, we would go to our faith, i.e., our church, Christianity. That's one of the main tools that we had. We would leave everything to God. We would go into our scripture. One of the things in my research that I found amongst the 12 women that I interviewed was that they exhibited more pain and strife by leaning towards their religion, i.e., their faith,
mm,
such as a Christianity religious faith, that didn't help their ability to heal. It actually agitated things and caused more of a problem. So one of the things that I found was looking at spirituality. We have so much research on religion. Let's take a look at spirituality. And one of the things that was defined, it was defined very uniquely and individualistic for each and every woman. And they were able to
That's
own
right.
that. It
That's
wasn't
right.
based on anyone else's influence or decision. So when it
yeah.
comes to cultural factors, I think cultural factors go back to being able to listen to the people that we serve and allow them to define what they feel or what they see is those factors that help you heal. But spirituality was one of those um, variables that a lot of those women said it worked, and they were able to cope and recover from intimate partner.
Thank you. See, this is why I wanted to talk about this topic this evening, because I mean, this information is so important to share. I like everyone has provided, like Dr. Gaines talking about the connection between faith and therapeutic services, Dr. Jackson talking about the importance of support networks, and Dr. Barnes Bay breaking down the definition and how we actually look at it. And that is important when you're looking at a relationship between any type of variables, especially trauma healing and resilience. So, still dealing with regards to factors, do you all think that socioeconomic factors increase an individual's ability to become resilient? Um, Dr. Jackson.
I believe I believe that it does, because if you have good things in place, you feel good. You look at things differently, right? When you're absent of things, you're looking at, like, we have to realize that people who have trauma usually perceive things like danger in
Mhm,
everything, right?
mhm,
But if you have healthy access to things that other people have access to, you begin to look at it differently. And that healing begins internally, and then you can exercise it better externally, if I'm making any sense.
Yes.
At this present moment. And so I really do. I do believe that it has a great deal with whether someone is able to heal or not heal.
Okay. Thank you. Dr. Gaines.
Um, I think that in a case where there are more resources, even if a traumatic experience occurs, it's more of a safety net, or it's a there's something in place to prevent total disaster. So,
Mm.
say for example, if there's there's domestic violence, or if there's alcoholism and it's impacting the children, if the family lives in a middle class or upper middle class home, there's still some uh, safeguards there.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they're not homeless. They have food to eat. They have clothes. They can go to school. They can interact with their peers. They can interact with um, the education system. So I think, whereas I'm sure we know that in a lower socioeconomic situation, if there's domestic violence, and or if a parent is incarcerated or whatever, and then the child is in the foster care system or something, it's exacerbated.
Mm.
So I do think, even within a trauma situation, I think the socioeconomic situation kind of safeguards to a certain extent, and protects in ways that the lower socioeconomic status groups don't even have that luxury. They can't even relate.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. Dr. Barnes Bay, what are your thoughts?
Well, I think my panelists did a great job with answering the question. Let me see. I think I lost a little reception here. Can you all hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah.
All right. So to the question, do I think socioeconomic factors increase an individual's ability to become resilient? Absolutely. Socioeconomic factors is one of the most important variables. Like the previous doctor shared, as far as low income and being in a urban community. Well, you know, years ago, there was a lot of restrictions. You see, today in 2020, you have the internet, you have more access, you have programs that are opening up that are offering resources to those who are on Medicaid or not, or on unemployment. There are
Mm-hmm.
programs out there that give you access to different therapists and different resources in order to heal. I would say that it's not always about the socioeconomic factors. It's more about dealing with the individual and their level of fear. A lot of
Mm.
times you have the access, but it's the fear that limits you from accessing the access to what you
Mm-hmm.
need in order to heal, in order to cope. And that comes from another place. Could be psychologically, could be mental health, could be a variety of different things. So I do agree and think that factors increase an individual's ability. But I will say that in my experience and in my research, I found that the women who had a higher level of degree were able to speak at a different level of understanding on how
Mm.
they became resilient, talked about their situation. Whereas I interviewed some young women who were between the ages of 23 and 25, and some of the questions asked, they just weren't able to answer it. Like they were unsure if I answered it correctly and if I didn't.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes society plays that effect on people, that if you have a higher degree, you're better. If you have a lower degree, you're not. And that's
Mm-hmm.
really not always the case in today's time. More and more access is being available to
Mm-hmm.
individuals who are facing trauma. I think it's a matter of sometimes getting out of your own way and being able to face those fears that are deep wounds, deep traumas, that's another level of focus. So I don't want to go on and on, but yes, I think
Don't worry.
socioeconomic factors influence.
No, thank you for that. Thank you for breaking it down and highlighting that it's not all about, like you said, socioeconomic factors. There's some other components But I do like how you all have really discussed access as being one of the factors. And like Dr. Gaines stated, low income versus middle class or higher income may have safeguards. So that is really important to take heed to. So this question, next question that I have for you all, how has racism influenced how African Americans deal with traumatic events? Um, Dr. Jackson, what are your thoughts? I saw you smiling, so let's start with you.
um, wow. This this is like an onion. This question is like an onion. there's just so there's so many layers to and ways to answer this question, and it really depends on mindset,
Mm,
right? It just really depends on mindset. It depends on if you're looking at, this is what my ancestors went through, and so this is the trauma that I have been dealt and I'm trying to get out of,
mhm.
or it's hmm, this is a difficult one
I know.
to
I,
answer.
I wanted you all to ponder a little bit
I
about
mean,
this
it's
because,
a
yeah.
difficult one. It's a difficult one to answer because not every not every Black person who has trauma has experienced racism.
Mm,
Yes.
So I just think that is, you've given me something to ponder because I really don't have an answer
no,
to
I
that,
mean
because
this is why we do this,
it's not so
Yeah.
straightforward. In
right?
some cases, yes. In some cases, it basically compounds the trauma that people are feeling. Like, if you're
Mhm,
going to look at poverty being a risk factor for trauma, right? And then you're looking at housing, lack of availability to housing in the Black communities, more like here in California, in the Sacramento area, they're tearing down housing that
mhm,
predominantly houses Black families, right? So they can start saying, okay, racism, because you really don't care about the Black family, and that's going to affect the kind of trauma that they feel, right? So I don't know. Like, I believe in some cases it does, but not everyone who has trauma has experienced racism.
mhm.
So
No, that was a good point that you actually mentioned that. Um, Dr. Barnes Bay, what are your thoughts?
I was really enjoying what you said because I'm right there with you. The first thing when I saw the question was, this word called racism and the mindset. And if everyone who has had a traumatic event has an understanding or an understanding of what racism is. I mean, granted, we are being thrown in our face what racism is.
Hmm.
Systemically, we talk about racism and different things that we've gone through as men and women of African descent. If you want to talk about those specific events, then I can relate it. But somebody like myself, I've experienced discrimination, I've experienced prejudices or biases.
right.
Racism, you know, it's one of those, to me, propagandial words, and I really couldn't put a finger on how racism influence how African Americans deal with traumatic events, besides the fact of the enforcement of what racism is and what we know it to be,
Mm,
and how that is internalized. And if you're holding on to, say, slavery, if you're holding on to the traditional definition of domestic violence, if you're holding on to all of these terms that were once in the past, then yes, it could very well influence how you become resilient, what tools you use, how you access
mm,
those tools. If you're stuck with that definition of what it is, it's all about mindset and how you perceive things to be. So if your mindset is racism is this, and because of it, I am unable to do something, then that's what it's going to be. But again,
mm,
when you shift the thinking and you change the narrative along with those definitions, then you're able to open up to how we deal with right now. And that is a whole another conversation in itself.
Yes, definitely.
I
um,
mean, I hope I was able to contribute to that question
no,
in any
yes.
way, but I'm with Dr.
No,
Jackson.
definitely.
It's all about mindset. And I'll tell you now, because of my research
Mhm.
on spirituality, I am researching different things to gain a better understanding, if you will.
Okay. Thank you. Dr.
You're welcome.
Gaines, it's your turn. What would you like to say?
Okay. Well, I think the nature of the American culture is that it's built racism is built in. It's part of the fabric of our culture. I think that African Americans are the ultimate example of resiliency and survivors because even for those of us who have made it, even for those of us who are successful, we still see that there are incidents of racist incidents, and it's just part of the culture. I believe that even if you don't feel like you've been victimized or if you've experienced racism, I just think the nature of our culture and how America began, um, it has never completely left. And I think we've been reminded of it recently with all the events that have taken place. And, and folks are, Black folks are getting their voice and they're getting strength and they're standing up. But I just believe that that is the culture of America. And I think we have to reckon with that.
Definitely. Yes. So you all provided phenomenal responses. And this question was set to help the audience really understand how difficult it is really to grasp that definition or concept of racism when we look at it in dealing with traumatic events experienced by African Americans. So the next question I have is, research within the area of trauma indicates that there is a relationship between systemic oppression and traumatic stress. How would you suggest African Americans navigate society when exposed to these factors? Um, Dr. Barnesbay.
Well, simply put, based on my research and from the amazing women who participated in my study, that is to link with your own. I really saw that women shared that having to get help from women who looked like them and had a level of understanding and resources, they were able to navigate better. They felt that dealing with those of the opposite ethnic background was not very helpful. And so in history, quote, African Americans have always gone to a therapist who was not relative to their culture, their background, with an attempt to be able to assist them. Many times that left women not, women particularly, not wanting to share, not wanting to speak out a lot. So people couldn't really understand what was going on and really give them the tools. When we look at the high incidences of intimate partner violence today and the homicides, we see that there's still a need to understand how better to navigate when dealing with a traumatic event. So I would just say my most deepest solution is for those to find individuals who are specialized, licensed professionals that understand their culture, that's from their culture, in order to be able to provide a level of intervention, resources, and strategies to further help them navigate with their traumatic event.
Thank you for
You're
that
welcome.
response. Dr. Jackson.
I do. I think that the correlation between it is a real thing. You have to look at the availability of services to certain communities.
Hmm.
And when, I don't know, let's say, again, therapeutic services are many times
Mhm.
not readily available the way needed, right?
Hmm.
So being able to again, being able to speak with someone who understands you from your cultural standpoint, and
Mhm.
being able to understand if you say something a specific way, they have an understanding of what you mean, right? And they're
Mhm.
not going to take it in a way unmeant. Um, Many times you'll hear the African American culture say, I don't have someone who looks like me. There's not enough
Hmm.
people who look at like me for me to talk to them. They're not going to understand me. I need help, but I don't know where to go for help. So it's not obvious what's out there.
Right.
Even if it is there, the resources are not being spread wide enough for them to understand where they can go to deal with their trauma and to alleviate the stress that comes with that trauma. Because again, you have stress on top of trauma because you're stressing out trying to fix your trauma.
Hmm.
So, you know, so I mean, I agree. I don't know. That's all I have on that.
No, no, it's good. Thank you
Yeah.
for sharing, um, Dr. Gaines.
I think that I think if we had more community-based programs or
Hmm.
communities of practice that um, help people. I think about the documentary Push Out, which well, the title is Push Out: The Criminal.
Uh-oh.
Oh no, I think
Uh-oh.
we have lost her, but we're going to go ahead and move on to our next question while she comes back. Um,
I'm
in
I'm
okay,
back.
oh, okay, thank you. Go ahead.
I just wanted to say quickly, the documentary Push Out that deals with young women in different community-based organizations throughout the country, and it helps them based on their ACEs score, which measures the amount of trauma they've experienced. And so that gets right at the root of what their issues are before they are completely in a system that doesn't value the experiences of a young Black woman. And so I think that we need more of that. We need more community based programs that are targeted at issues related to trauma and resiliency, and having the tools to help the young ladies to validate their experiences and not blame the victim, as it were, for their experiences.
No, thank you. No, you all have
Mhm.
highlighted something very key I would want to share with the audience is availability of resources and having a culturally
Mhm.
competent practitioner that can really understand and guide you according to the lens that you are coming from. So that's really profound
Mhm.
that you guys highlighted that. Our next question here is, in what ways has media influenced the perception of trauma and resilience? We can go ahead and start with Dr. Barnes Bay.
Well, technology, the media is wide. Uh, Facebook is one large influence, media influence on how everyone communicates. One of the things that I would say is in Facebook today, when it comes to dealing with trauma and resilience, we have so many groups that men, women, and children can link to talk about what they're going through and receive that immediate attention and care or intervention to help with what they're going through. I think you have a lot of empowerment groups on social media. One in particular, well, not just one, but two that I like comes from one, Iyanla Van Zandt, Fix My Life, where she's working with so many different brothers and sisters in their trauma, in their chaos, in their adversity. And she is empowering those individuals up to do it yourself, how to fix your life, what you need to do. And then there's another media influence, which is red table talk. I think this is a great way for people of the African community and all communities to be able to listen in and have someone that they can relate to. Like, you look at that and you say, you know, I've gone through that. I never thought about it like that. You know, so media gives us an opportunity to see what others are going through, hear what others are going through, and to be able to provide a platform as to strategies and or methods to become more resilient. So I think that the media has a great positive influence as well as some negative influences where you have intimate partner violence. There are a lot of safety issues with that, and that
Mm-hmm.
can pose an issue. But as far as influence in a good way, I think there's some great platforms out there that are creating positive space for people to talk about trauma and become very
Mhm.
resilient.
Okay. Thank you. Dr. Jackson, what are your thoughts?
I believe that the influence has been both positive and negative, and it just depends on how people are using it, right? You have some people using media or social media because they want to begin to thrive. And so I talk about redefining resilience. The universal is someone who has made it through an adverse situation, right? To me, that's survival.
Mhm.
How I redefine resilience, and really I'm just going to keep saying it until it catches on, is that resilience is the ability for someone to go through a traumatic experience and thrive. They're not just
Mhm.
living from day to day hoping that it's going to be okay, right? So social media and media has made it okay to begin to talk,
Mm,
Mhm.
begin to talk about what's going on, begin to talk about how you feel, begin to say, hey, I need help, hey, I'm going through this, where otherwise people would not do it. It builds
right.
a
Mhm.
comfort level for many people who would have just stayed at that survival level hoping that everything was okay day to day, and move
Mhm.
to that journey to resilience and begin to thrive because they have that extra input. However, I've also seen where it is not so positive. And during my research, I visited a lot of the social media sites for adult survivors of childhood maltreatment. Because I really
Mhm.
needed to see what was going on in this world, right? And the intention is good. The
Mhm.
results, not always so positive, because it becomes a space where people are outpouring and they're getting people to co-sign and the negative, right? There's not the positive input that one would probably need when they're when they're disclosing some of the things that are being disclosed in those groups. So it allows people to stay in that space of survival and not necessarily move to that space of thriving. So in a
Mm,
way, I love to see the positive nature of it because people are getting where I just really want everyone to be. I want everybody to wake up in the morning and they're thriving and they're good. And even if they have traumatic intrusions, they're doing well because they know how to handle it, and they're
mm,
building their support systems, which are necessary, and they're being intentional with healing, right? But there are still some of those spaces where you can crawl into and get setbacks so immensely.
Mhm. Mhm.
no,
Any
thank you for breaking that down.
yes.
Never really thought about it like that. This is why discussing this and really having you all as the experts really dissecting it is really helpful to the audience. And I just want to reach out to them real briefly. If you are watching, please go ahead and share this live web series with all your friends as we discuss trauma healing and resilience. Profound topic, and with our expert panelists that we have here. So, Dr. Gaines, what are your thoughts with regard to this question?
I believe that uh, media has served a good for those people, for those who want to express themselves, and the access is wide for getting on and sharing experiences or talking through things. And I mean, I know of people I know and people I don't know who have used social media as a means of their own healing and their own expression and their self-expression. And I think it's really valuable. I even think, like with the Black Lives Movement, the Me Too movement, and even with our wonderful former First Lady Michelle Obama, how she even used social media to share that she was experiencing some mild depression. I think that gave a voice to those who may um, experience depression, especially in this COVID pandemic time. I
Mm-hmm.
think she did a service to us all, to see someone that looks like us who was so accomplished, but used the influence of social media to share. And I think so I think it's important. I think instead of for some people who may have been more self-destructive, they can pick up a phone and they can go on Facebook Live or whatever it is, whatever means they're using to express themselves and to be heard. And I think that's important for people who are going through, who are um, healing and trying to survive. They're just holding on. And so I think that in that way, I think
Mm-hmm.
social media has served us well because social media is so accessible to many people. It's not accessible to everybody, but a
Right.
lot of people have access to it and they can use it for their own good. And it actually helps other people too.
Absolutely.
Definitely. Yeah, and this is
Yeah.
what we're doing. This is an active example by having these live panel discussions
Right.
about topics that are really relevant. So,
Right.
like you said, like you all have commented, social media in general has its good and its bad, but when it's done
Hmm.
for good, it can have a good outreach to a lot of people.
Right.
The next question that I have for you all is, what role does trauma, healing, and resilience play in professional development? Dr. Barnes Bay.
Well, it plays a very, very important role to be able to, as a professional, to know what trauma is, to know what healing is, to understand what resilience is, and how you connect to the clients that you serve. Without having a professional background and training and experience, you're really unable to, you do a disservice to the people that you work with. So I think as a social worker like myself, um, I'm right now, taking further additional trainings on trauma healing as well as resilience. Why? Because every day things change. We need to stay abreast
Mhm.
as to
No.
my back.
So, yeah, we can hear you now.
All right. So when it comes to professional development, I think that we in the human service profession, the social work, all of these different arenas, we definitely need to increase our awareness, our understanding, continue to get ongoing training so that we can
Mhm.
continue to serve our diverse population. When you think about COVID
Hmm.
and what's going on right now, we need to understand what that trauma may be to someone right now. What does it look like for a single mother with two children who may be trapped in the house with an abuser? Are we professionally trained in order to deal with that? So I think that it's very important for us to stay abreast, to stay aware, to stay trained, and to never stop learning. I understand for
Hmm.
myself that I'm a forever student, always sharpening my axe every day so that I'm able to
Hmm.
serve better my
Absolutely.
community.
Thank you for that. That is very important. That continuous
Yeah.
development. Um, Dr. Gaines, what are your thoughts?
I think what I this when I was just thinking about it. I know from the ACEs study that measures childhood experiences with trauma, one of the hallmarks is that as the person grows older, they have an inability to maintain a work. They can't make a living. They're unable to support themselves. They have that, just not able to keep a job. And I would suspect that some of that is because they may be acting out in the workplace. They may not have a professional development mindset. And so they're in a work environment. They may be bumping up against someone else who has suffered trauma and who hasn't been healed. And so there's this ability to not be successful, not be able to support yourself. And so I think once we can deal with that and talk about the trauma and the healing and put people in a place where they can be resilient, I think that is the hallmark of professional development for folks as they become, as adults, as they get into the workforce, as they go to college. Um, I think it's vitally important to be able to identify um, trauma and to seek the healing that is needed, so that we won't have another generation of people who are unable to support themselves
Mm.
because they were traumatized as children.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for highlighting the impact it can have generationally.
That's
It's
right.
very important.
Yeah.
Dr. Jackson, what are your thoughts?
My thoughts on this is it's very important. And the hard part for me is that it's probably been less than a decade that our professional arena has begun to really focus on trauma and become trauma informed and trauma trained,
Mm-hmm.
which has a long lasting effect on our community and people's ability or desire to actually seek help because
Mm-hmm.
they've been traumatized seeking help. So for professionals in this arena to continue to educate themselves and come up to date on what it looks like to treat somebody with trauma, knowing that if somebody disclosed trauma, that you have to have the willingness to say, okay, whatever we were going to work on, we're not working on that anymore. We're about to change directions so that we can
Mm-hmm.
begin to address your trauma, right? Um, Understanding trauma in professional development also means that we're not looking at the behaviors. We're the behaviors. We should actually be saying, okay, let's begin to address the trauma that's causing the behaviors, whatever those may be, so that we
Mm-hmm.
can mitigate those and have those begin to recede and people do better, right? So if our practitioners are not trauma informed and trauma trained, they need to get on the boat
Mm-hmm.
because we need to stop re-traumatizing people who are traumatized, who are coming to get help and who are coming for
That's
healing,
right.
but won't go back
Mm-hmm.
because you didn't said something that actually triggered them, although you didn't
Right.
know that. However,
Wow.
if you
Right.
were trauma
Right. Right.
informed, you would have known that that would have caused that problem, and you wouldn't have done it. So I have a great soapbox on that, so I'm going to climb up off of that. Um,
No,
but
thank
it's
you.
it's extremely important. It's a requirement, actually, if you ask me. But anyway,
Yeah, that's why I wanted to ask that question because in the professional setting, we're in robot mode. We're just, task oriented, solution focused, but we don't really think about that relationship between trauma, healing, and resilience. And like Dr. Jackson said, you're traumatized within the work setting sometimes.
That's
So
right.
it's hard
That's
to
right.
really move forward. But no,
Mhm.
thank you all for your responses. The last question that I have for this evening, we've really looked at the definition of trauma, healing, and resilience. Now I want to focus more so on what are some ways that we can continue to aid the process of healing and foster the development of resilience within the African American community. Um, Dr. Gaines.
Well, I think forums like this, I know I have definitely learned from being a part of this group.
Mm,
Um, I think there needs to be further study, like Dr. Jackson said. I think that there needs to be more opportunities for practitioners to learn about healing and recovery and resilience and those types of things. I don't think we should be afraid of it. I
Right.
think most of us could use a little help in one way, shape, or form, and provide a transparency where it's not shame based. Um, and I just think, again, like I said before, communities of practice that welcome everybody, um, and have a place for everybody to experience healing and recovery.
Thank you. Dr.
Mhm.
Barnes Bay, what's your thoughts?
Uh-uh.
You muted.
No,
Oh, try and come
no.
close and you come back
Okay, I'm
in.
muted now.
Yeah, we can hear
I
you now.
wanted to say that I wanted to camelback on what Dr. Gaines said, which is a platform like this. I'm most humbled and
Mm,
appreciated that you all are bringing this conversation
Right.
starter,
Yes.
venue, so that we can have the
Mhm.
conversation, so that we can learn from each other. Dr. Jackson shared some amazing tips on who she is and what she does. This
Mhm.
gives people in our community access. So they
mm,
need to tune into a platform like this one. I think also looking at my particular research study, some of the things that fosters healing is spirituality. And that
Mhm.
spirituality consists of creating private spaces of meditation, taking walks,
Mhm.
having sacred circles, being
Yes.
able to have a cultural competency intervention program that focus specifically on that particular trauma. I also think, once again, having a directory of who's out there, professionals, what they train in, what they specialize in. Because I think that
Mhm.
people are ready to have the conversation. They're ready
Yes.
to heal.
mhm.
They want to heal. I,
Yeah,
I, I do see that.
Yes.
And I'll camel
that's
back on
right.
one of
Yes, they
my
do.
one of my interviewees, she told me, she said, Dr. Barnes Bay, it's a new day. We have to have the conversation.
That's right.
We cannot be afraid to talk about the issues that are plaguing our person and our community. So I think
That's
that
right.
just talking more, sharing experiences without bias, without judgment, a platform that is very empathetic and open to hear people's stories and voices without blaming them, without shaming them, and making them feel
That's
Yes.
right.
very safe. So I think that that's
That's
one of the
right.
Absolutely.
ways we can continue the process of healing.
Yes, that's right.
Thank you. Thank you. That was awesome the way you provided that
Right.
information. Dr. Jackson, what about you?
Oh, so let me tell you, this brings me to, we always talk about the stigma of mental health, right? We do. But
Mhm.
people are not talking about the stigma of trauma. And they're two different things, just in case you didn't know, right? You have people who don't want to talk because they're ashamed of the trauma that they've gone through. And
Mhm.
most people don't really want to hear it. Oh, you've been trauma. Okay,
Right.
well, pull yourself up by the bootstraps and let's carry on. No, thank you. So, first of all, starting a conversation about the stigma of trauma would actually help a lot of people begin to unpack um, what is going on with
Mhm.
them. Building more community resources. I will go back to community resources. I truly
Mhm.
believe in building safe spaces for people to come and be and talk and unload their burdens on, or
Mhm.
that's the word I can come up with right now, in a space where they can leave it and know that it's safe. And when
Mm.
they come back, they don't have to pick it up, but they're leaving a lot lighter than when they arrived, right?
Yeah.
So just platforms like this, I will echo that for the third time, and just saying, hey, don't be ashamed. Speak up,
Yeah.
because healing starts when you talk. It's not going to happen if you don't talk. It's not going to happen if you
That's
continue to
right.
suppress. And there's no need to be ashamed, because everybody has gone through something. And the difference between you and the person who talked is that you are still stuck surviving and they're thriving a little bit more than what you are right now. So we got to talk. We got to talk.
Yes, and this is
Yeah.
exactly what we're doing this evening.
Yes.
No, I really appreciate you ladies breaking down this topic. You all have done an incredible, phenomenal job. I just want to thank you profoundly for really dissecting this and helping our audience really understand what this looks like from all walks of life, from all perspectives this evening. So, with that being said, I know our audience members may want to get in contact with you all because you guys have shared so many different perspectives. I want them to have an opportunity to do so. So I just wanted, by if you all could just provide me with a little bit of your contact information on how the audience members can get in contact with you. Dr. Gaines, what is your contact information?
Well, I can be reached on Facebook at Healing Our Hearts. I also have the website, healingourhearts.us. And we're still in the process of building it up, but there is material there that you can take advantage of and visit and leave notes or whatever, like it, share it. And there will be more content probably after this event. I have some other material I need to put up there too.
Okay, thank you. Dr.
Thank
Barnes?
you.
Johnny, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. So I can be reached at axbbay@gmail.com. I also have a website, UMI Resource Coalition.org, which is AUMI Resource Coalition.org. And that's a platform where you could share what you're going through, what your needs are, and I will streamline my services to be able to assist you.
Dr. Jackson.
Okay, I can be reached at njackson.nicoles Jackson. NicoleSJackson.com. Also, you can on Facebook, there's a group called Let's Talk Resilience. You can reach me through there as well. Just it's a safe space. It's a space created for people to come and talk about the things they need to talk about and share community.
Awesome. No, but thank you guys for this profound, phenomenal discussion this evening. You guys have really highlighted and really opened the content area for exploration within trauma healing and resilience. I want to say to our audience, if you are interested in learning more about this topic and other ones similar to this, please be sure to register at the blackphdnetwork.org 2020 conference that will be going on October 29th through the 31st. Again, thank you, ladies, for joining us this evening and sharing your expertise within this area. And to our audience, please share this live if you have missed it or would like to have other people join for our future lives. And again, we look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you.
Thank you.